Hey, this is Joe from PreSonus. I think reverb is kind of like the ebb and flow of an economy. In like the 80s, it was like all reverb. And then you get into like the 90s and 2000s and things are pretty dry, but it feels like the last decade or so, the reverb has made a massive comeback. So I'm going to talk about today how to go about choosing your reverb. And it's actually, the way I like to do it is really simple. Maybe this will help you simplify finding that perfect reverb sound for your song. So first of all, here are a simple dry, very simple piano part and a dry vocal part. Here's what it sounds like dry.
Always thought that I'd be invincible.
And we're not going to have a conversation about whether we should or shouldn't add reverb to this. Let's assume that we do. And how do we go about doing that? One of my favorite reverbs to use is, of course, in Studio One. If you hit F7 to open up the effects panel over here on the right-hand side, and you scroll to find room reverb, which is, sorry, I've changed up my keyboard shortcuts a little bit, so I'm out of place. Here it is right here. So what we're going to do is I want to put this on the vocal here as well as the piano. So I'm going to select these two, hold down Shift, select one, hold down Shift, select the other, and I'm going to drag room reverb into the send section of either one of these, and so it's going to put room reverb on both. So being drag and drop awesomeness that it is, room reverb is now here with the sends, and we can see that we've created a reverb effects chain here with these settings. So the default setting here looks like I've got it set up to room, shocker, with about a 2/3 of a second decay time. So here's what that sounds like just kind of right out of the box.
Always thought that I'd be invincible.
So I'm going to tell you one thing that I would do first before anything. There's something about reverb, and it's really not exclusive to this reverb. Really, all reverbs tend to do this. They tend to create a lot of low-end rumble. Now, occasionally that's wonderful for a big like orchestral piece with big upright basses, contrabass, whatever you call it. It's nice to have that fullness there. But typically, I find that low end, like 200 and below in a reverb, doesn't do me much good. So most of my reverb presets, I actually throw a Pro EQ after the reverb and set a high-pass filter to something like 200-300 hertz. Because there's nothing much down there that's going to do us much good. So that's kind of my starting point. So I do that first and then listen to the reverbs. Because we might have listened to that original reverb there and said, it's a little bit too muddy. If we go ahead and EQ all of our reverb sounds that we're going to listen to, then we can just hear the reverb in a more proper context. So here's what that sounds like now.
Always thought that I'd be invincible.
So that's already a pretty great sound. Here's where I think it's easy for you to go wrong. When I first learned about reverb years and years and years ago, it was in like a classroom setting, and we were learning about all of these like words down here that I've long since forgotten. Early reflections and the decay time and all of those things. And so the next time I got in the studio, I was adjusting all of these different settings. I'm like, I'm going to find the absolute perfect reverb setting. And I would move all of these. This was on an outboard like hardware reverb unit, and I spent probably an hour just adjusting settings till I thought I had the perfect unique reverb sound. We listened to the sound in the next class. We listened to my mix, and it was actually my roommate at the time said, it sounds like the vocal is in a bathroom. I thought, yeah, you're right. So you can get into a lot of trouble coming in here and messing with these settings. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but rather than do that, if this isn't quite the sound that you want, what I would recommend is just cycle through some presets first. So easiest way to do that is to just click this little button right here, these left and right. By the way, that's mapped to page up and page down. So you could just hit play, grab your page up and page down keys, and just go through and start listening to little different presets, and then find one that feels pretty close to what you're looking for.
Always thought that I'd be invincible.
That one's kind of cool because it's got this pre-delay of 300 milliseconds, so it's almost like an eighth note delay, which is cool. But let's keep going.
Always thought that I'd be invincible. always talked my way out of trouble.
So as you can see, you can go through, and each of these, some of them are very similar. Some of them you might say, I can't really hear a difference, but then some have really interesting character to them. So instead of pulling up one and then tweaking the crap out of it, someone else has already tweaked the crap out of these settings, namely the people at PreSonus. So go through and listen to their presets first and find the handful that you really like out of the box. And then maybe go in and tweak. And here are the things that I tweak. I don't tweak very much. I will come in just this upper section here, I will tweak things like this length, which is the length of like the reverb tail, and I might mess with the pre-delay. And maybe the size, because the size affects the length. That's it. I don't mess with anything else. If I start tweaking too much, I say it's just not the right preset. Let's just move on and find the one that we like. So for example, one that I use all the time, I wonder if I can find it here. Let's just go through and actually look. It's you've seen me use it before. It's called the flat plate. And this one is really cool. It's mainly just the tail part of it. So I'll pull up this setting and then I'll just adjust this tail up to 4 to 6 seconds. And it's ridiculously long, but it's actually kind of cool.
Always thought that I'd be invincible.
General rule of thumb for me, if I'm going big, long, obnoxious tail to my reverb, then kind of inversely proportional to how much reverb there is, I will turn down how much I'm sending to it. So for example, with that much of a tail, I'll turn the volume of the reverb down.
Always thought that I'd be invincible.
So that way it sits back and it fills up a nice space, but it's not obnoxious and super loud. So that's just a real kind of my simple, arguably stupid simple, obnoxiously simple approach to setting up reverbs. But that really to me works with any reverb plugin you have. We have a few inside of Studio One. Room Reverb is the one I reach for the most. Maybe you have other third-party reverbs with all sorts of cool settings. I would tend to try to not get too lost in the weeds with those settings. Try the presets that they have, EQ it after to make sure there's no rumble, and then just adjust things like the length of the tail and maybe the amount of pre-delay, and then kind of leave it at that. Between those two settings, the preset that you chose, and then how much you're sending to the reverb, you've got plenty to dial in the perfect sound for your mix. Thanks so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. I'll see you in the next one.